"You're not allowed in here," the security guard snapped. The young black delivery guy paused, holding the food bag. "All right," he said calmly. "I'll be back tomorrow." The guard laughed. "Yeah, sure you will." But the next day he did come back. In a suit. With lawyers. And ownership papers. "I'm not delivering lunch today," he said. "I'm delivering change." The building went silent. Faces turned pale. What happened in just 24 hours flipped the script. And no one saw it coming. You'll want to see exactly how he pulled it off. The rain hadn't let up all morning. It fell in long, draping sheets that blurred the skyline and painted the streets in a glaze of silver. Outside, umbrellas collided like indifferent strangers. Yellow cabs hissed through puddles, and steam curled up from subway grates, ghostly and alive. Inside the high facade of Sterling Tower, the storm might as well have been a rumor. The building stood like a monument to money. Not the loud kind flaunted in gold chains or sports cars, but the cold, quiet kind. The kind that owned real estate portfolios, made phone calls from private jets, and wore custom Italian suits stitched with no labels at all. The lobby was a temple to understatement. Vast polished granite floors reflected light in a way that made every step sound deliberate. Brushed steel elevators rose silently up the core of the structure, like arteries carrying power to the top. An oversized Chihuly sculpture floated above the central atrium, casting fractured blue shadows across marble. Even the air was different here, cool, filtered, crisp like refrigerated linen. Jamal Carter stepped through the revolving doors and into that air, and it hit him immediately, the contrast. His sneakers squelched faintly with each step, soaked from the downpour outside. A dark hoodie clung to his shoulders, the cotton damp and clinging to his skin, and the smell of city rain. Wet concrete, rubber, distant car exhaust rose off him in waves. In his arms he clutched a brown paper bag, slightly damp but still warm. Inside, containers of Thai food nestled against each other. Panang curry, jasmine rice, and an order of spring rolls. At the reception desk, a uniformed security guard sat behind a slab of imported marble the color of bone. He looked up slowly, his eyes narrowing beneath pale brows. Mid-50s, white. His gut strained against the tight hem of his navy blue jacket. His name tag, R. Halvorsen, was positioned squarely over his heart like a badge of authority. Halvorsen took one look at Jamal and didn't bother hiding what he saw. "Where you think you're going?" he said, voice like gravel dragged across asphalt. Jamal paused just past the security scanner. A bead of rain trailed down his temple. He shifted the bag in his hands. "Delivery for floor 42, he said evenly. "Panang curry and—" "Use the service entrance," Halvorsen interrupted, already rising to his feet, his belt hitching up as he adjusted his stance. Jamal blinked once, expression unreadable. "They buzzed me in through the front. Said to come straight in." "You're not allowed up without clearance," Halvorsen said, puffing his chest out. "Rules." Behind Jamal, the glass doors revolved again, and a man in a sleek navy suit swept through the scanner without even breaking stride. No ID, no questions. The receptionist didn't even glance up. Jamal turned his head slightly to watch the suited man disappear toward the elevators, then looked back at Halvorsen. "So," he said slowly, "it's not about the rules, huh?" Halvorsen's jaw twitched. "You trying to make this difficult?" The lobby, for all its architectural ambition, had gone still. Behind the concierge counter, a woman pretended to type, though her eyes flicked over every few seconds. Near the coffee station, two interns in tight slacks whispered, one clutching a paper cup, the other not even pretending not to eavesdrop. Jamal took it in. All of it. The scent of lemongrass and chili and fried shallots wafted up from the paper bag in his arms, mingling with the sterile air like an intruder. The rain-soaked hem of his jeans clung to his ankles. He could feel the judgment pressing down on him, not just from Halvorsen, but from the building itself. The glass, the floors, the lights, all quietly suggesting he didn't belong. But he didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, didn't let the moment bend him. He exhaled slowly. "All right, he said, voice calm as still water. I'll be back tomorrow. Halvorsen made a noise deep in his throat. Something like a laugh but meaner. Yeah, sure you will. Jamal turned, pushed through the revolving doors, and stepped back into the rain. That night the storm had passed. The sky was still low and gray, but the air had the washed-clean feeling of a city rinsed of its filth, at least for a moment. In Harlem, just above a bodega that sold lottery tickets and loose cigarettes, Jamal Carter sat in a modest studio apartment with peeling paint and a radiator that hissed when it got nervous. The glow from his laptop lit his face, casting shadows beneath his cheekbones. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of traffic from Amsterdam Avenue and the occasional muffled bass line from a neighbor's speaker down the hall. On the screen in front of him, a long email thread lay open, one that stretched back months. Dozens of exchanges, negotiations, red lines, legalese, a game of inches and commas. At the bottom, a document waited. Contract, Sterling Tower Holdings LLC transference of ownership. The words pulsed in silence. The digital signature field blinked like an invitation. Jamal didn't smile. Not yet. He leaned back slightly in the creaky swivel chair, fingertips pressed together beneath his chin. His hoodie had dried. The sneakers, propped near the radiator, still held a faint dampness, but he didn't care. He thought about that lobby, about Halvorsen's face, about the way power had looked that morning. Polished, unbothered, dismissive. He thought about the years it had taken to reach this point. The night classes, the startup grind, the doors closed in his face, the loan rejections, the angel investors who smiled too wide and offered too little, the partners who bailed at the first sign of risk, the deals that fell apart at the last second. And yet here he was. The brown paper bag was still on his counter. He'd eaten half the curry cold while reading through the final agreement. Outside the window, the city glittered, endless lights flickering like a million unspoken promises. He hovered his mouse over the signature box. This wasn't revenge. That wasn't his style. It was clarity. Power moving quietly, just like Sterling Tower. He clicked. A soft chime. Confirmation. It was done. Tomorrow the paperwork would file. Tomorrow Sterling Tower Holdings would have a new owner. Not the whole building, not yet, but a controlling share. Enough to sit at the table. Enough to make changes. Enough to walk through the front door without being told to take the side. He leaned forward again, closed the laptop, sat for a moment in the stillness. He could already see the headlines, small and buried in the business section, but they're nonetheless. Tech entrepreneur acquires controlling interest in Midtown skyscraper. Harlem native expands property holdings into financial district. Let them laugh today. Let Halvorsen scoff and the interns whisper, and the receptionist pretend she didn't notice. Tomorrow they'd notice. Tomorrow they'd listen. And when he walked back into that building, same hoodie, same stride, they'd see not a delivery boy, not a mistake, not a disruption to their world. They'd see the future walking in, and it would be wearing wet sneakers. The next morning, the rain was gone, pushed eastward by low, fast-moving clouds that left the city in a state of quiet recovery. But Manhattan never dries clean. Instead, it glistened with the residue of the storm. Slick sidewalks that reflected traffic lights like a film reel, gutters still gurgling with yesterday's runoff, and that lingering smell that only comes after a summer downpour. Part ozone, part oil, part something metallic, like the aftershock of electricity in the air. The streets bustled as they always did. Suits brushed past street vendors. Heels clicked rapidly on damp concrete. And through the haze of the morning's hustle, at precisely 8:42 a.m., the revolving doors of Sterling Tower turned once again. But this time, Jamal Carter didn't wear a hoodie. He wore a suit. A tailored charcoal gray number, slim through the waist and cut just right at the shoulders. A crisp white shirt beneath it, open at the collar, no tie, no need. His shoes were leather, polished to a matte shine, and his watch, slim and gold, peeked out from beneath his sleeve like it had somewhere more important to be. In his right hand, he carried a black leather briefcase with smooth edges and fine stitching. No food bag. No plastic utensils. No scent of curry. Just presence. He walked differently now, not arrogantly, but with the unmistakable rhythm of someone who belonged. Each step made the polished granite floors echo just slightly, just enough to suggest weight. The lobby hadn't changed. Not the cold, modernist gleam of stone and brushed steel. Not the clean lines, the echoing cavernous hush, the smell of fresh espresso curling from the glass cafe near the elevators. The same abstract sculptures stood in their curated, museum-like stillness. The same ambient music. Soft jazz, played just loud enough to feel expensive, still poured from hidden speakers. And yet, everything felt different. The receptionist at the desk looked up. Her brows twitched for half a second, confusion furrowing into her otherwise expressionless face. Behind her, at the security post, Halvorsen stood again, sipping from a black Sterling Tower, branded coffee mug. His fingers tapped on a security monitor, eyes drifting lazily across the screen. Then he saw him, their eyes locked. A pause. At first, Halvorsen's brain tried to file the man in front of him under CEO or executive, the kind of guy who came in for high-level board meetings or real estate closings. The suit, the briefcase, the watch, the stride. But then recognition hit him like a slow-moving train. His lips parted. "You," he said, voice scraping up from the back of his throat. "You're the delivery guy." Jamal didn't slow. He didn't change expression. "I'm not delivering lunch today," he said, tone smooth but firm. "I'm delivering change." Behind him, 3 people followed, 2 men and a woman, all in suits, walking in practice step. One man carried a document portfolio tucked under his arm. The woman walked briskly with a MacBook already open in her hands, typing notes as they moved. The third adjusted his tie and checked his watch as they approached the reception desk. These weren't assistants. They were lawyers. Halvorsen blinked, as if trying to reset the scene. "Hold on, you can't just walk in here," he said, stepping forward, trying to reassert authority, instinct kicking in where protocol didn't. But Jamal was already placing his briefcase on the marble counter. He flipped the latches with calm precision and pulled out a thin blue folder, sleek, embossed, the kind made by firms that charge by the minute. He laid it flat between them. Inside, documents fanned out neatly. Signatures, stamps. A raised corporate seal that caught the lobby lights like a whisper of gold. At the top, Certificate of Transfer, Sterling Tower Holdings. The receptionist leaned slightly forward. A man in a suit nearby, scrolling through his phone, looked up. Another behind him lowered his coffee cup and turned to listen. A subtle ripple began to move through the space. One of those moments New Yorkers pretend not to notice but always clock. Halvorsen's hand hovered awkwardly over the counter. His mouth moved, but no words came out for a second. This is some kind of joke," he muttered, disbelief clinging to the syllables like fog. Jamal tilted his head slightly. He didn't look angry. He didn't have to be. "You think they let people like me buy buildings?" he asked quietly, voice steady, controlled, with the edge of something sharper just beneath. "You think I got here by asking permission? I didn't knock. I built my own damn staircase." His voice didn't rise, but the room heard him. The janitor by the far wall paused mid-sweep, leaning slightly on the handle of his mop. The 2 receptionists stilled. Even the smooth ding of the elevator arriving sounded reverent. "Effective as of 8 a.m. this morning," one of the lawyers announced, laying a second folder beside the first. "Mr. Jamal Carter is the sole majority owner of Sterling Tower. Certified, filed, and registered with the state of New York and the SEC." There it was, final, unmovable. Halvorsen's face drained of color, his jaw tight with the weight of confusion, embarrassment, and disbelief all colliding at once. He opened his mouth again, reaching for anything: doubt, authority, resistance. This has to be some kind of mistake," he said, now more softly, less certain. Jamal looked at him. Not with triumph, not with vengeance, but with something else. Clarity. A kind of stillness that comes from surviving the long climb. "You didn't see me yesterday," he said. "You saw what you expected to see." A guy in a hoodie, wet sneakers, a brown bag. And you treated me the way this building has always treated people like me. He paused just long enough to let that land. But I didn't come back for revenge. He turned slightly, gaze lifting toward the tower's heart. I came to renovate. And then he walked away, past Halvorsen, past the desk, toward the elevators which opened as if on cue. 42 floors up, the doors parted to reveal the penthouse level, formerly the private domain of a legacy investment firm that had sat atop Sterling Tower since 1989. Every inch had been tailored to corporate elitism. Mahogany desks, fine art, muted earth-tone rugs. A corner office with glass walls gave the illusion of floating over the skyline. Jamal stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out beneath him like a living organism. The grid pulsed. Yellow cabs streamed like capillaries. Billboards flickered. From this height, the buildings felt less oppressive, more architectural. A stage. He let out a long breath. This view didn't feel like a reward. It felt like responsibility. Ownership didn't bring peace. It brought weight. The weight of expectations. The weight of a community watching. The weight of being the first and making sure you weren't the last. Behind him, the soft knock of knuckles on glass. His new assistant, a sharp, composed woman in a slate dress, stepped in, tablet in hand. City Business Weekly is requesting an interview, she said. They want to go live. Forbes reached out too. And Cranes. Jamal didn't turn. He kept his gaze on the streets below. The city had tried to make him feel small. It had failed. Now the city was watching. Let them wait. 12 years earlier, Jamal sat behind the chipped plexiglass counter of his uncle's bodega in Bed-Stuy, earbuds jammed deep into his ears, the low murmur of lo-fi beats mixing with the occasional buzz of the front door chime. The store was small and always a few degrees warmer than outside, even in summer. A refrigerator hummed unevenly. The air smelled faintly of frying oil, incense, and cleaning fluid. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, tired, like everything else in the place. The linoleum tiles beneath his stool had started to curl at the edges, yellowing from years of foot traffic and mopping. A dusty, oscillating fan clicked somewhere in the back, and the lotto machine made occasional beeping sounds no one ever fully paid attention to. But for Jamal, this cluttered corner store wasn't just a side hustle or family duty. It was a pocket of quiet, and quiet meant space to dream. Between ringing up sodas and calling out prices for chopped cheese sandwiches, Jamal kept his head down and his hands busy. A sketchbook lay open on the counter beside the register, pages curling like leaves in humidity. The drawings inside weren't cartoon characters or graffiti tags like his friends did. No, Jamal sketched buildings, not just single towers, but entire city blocks reimagined in pencil and ink. He drew grocery stores on corners where there were none. Playgrounds where cracked lots sat empty. Mixed-income homes with gardens on their roofs and solar panels catching imaginary sunlight. He redrew the neighborhoods he knew in the only way he could: better. Whole worlds reborn through graphite and lined paper. His mother had seen the notebook once and shaken her head with a smile that held a sigh beneath it. Just doodles, she'd called them. His uncle, hands always stained with oil from working the grill, had looked closer. This ain't just lines, he'd said. This is something different. But not everyone was convinced. His high school guidance counselor, during a quarterly check-in, looked over one of Jamal's sketches, an entire transit hub concept drawn on notebook paper, and raised an eyebrow. Architecture, she said. That's ambitious. Maybe something more realistic? HVAC work? Or maybe construction management? Jamal said nothing. He just kept drawing. By 19, life had shifted gears. He was holding down 2 jobs, bike courier by day, dishwasher by night. He moved through the city like a ghost, weaving through traffic with Thai food on his back, then scrubbing dishes at a fusion restaurant until his fingers wrinkled. His hands were always cold, his calves always sore. And yet, in every spare moment between shifts on subway rides, while waiting for deliveries, he was learning. Architecture classes on YouTube, finance blogs read in the glow of his cracked phone. Audiobooks on real estate law playing through one earbud while he zipped through traffic. Late-night forum posts on investing strategies. Online courses on urban planning. He made his own curriculum because no one else was offering him one. He never got into the Ivy League. He applied 14 times. To Columbia, to Cornell, to Yale, to MIT. All rejections. He printed each one out and framed them in cheap plastic frames from the dollar store. Lined them up on his bedroom wall like medals. They weren't failures to him, they were fuel. Eventually, he started finding other ways forward. He found online communities, anonymous mentors from different states, late-night Reddit threads, Black real estate forums where knowledge passed like currency. One member, an architect from Detroit, noticed his sketches and messaged him privately. They started Zoom sessions once a week. That's how Jamal learned to draft in CAD. That's how he learned zoning law. That's how he stopped drawing dreams and started designing plans. Then came the break. A small, Black-owned venture capital firm, Brooklyn-based, lean, and run by 3 sharp-eyed women who believed in underfunded potential, saw one of his concept decks on a pitch forum. He was 22, nervous, wearing the only blazer he owned. But when he pitched, he didn't blink. The firm gave him a modest grant. Not enough to buy property, not yet, but enough to register an LLC, pay for some professional software, and rent a shared desk at a startup incubator in Crown Heights. It wasn't much, but it was oxygen. They don't invest in ideas. One of the founders told him after signing the check. They invest in dreams. Just make sure yours is too heavy to float away. At 24, Jamal bought his first building. It was a foreclosed laundromat in East New York. Roof leaking. Pigeons living in the back room. The bank rep had scoffed when Jamal walked in alone. No lawyer, no broker, offering cash. They took it. Not because they believed in him, but because they didn't care. 18 months later, that laundromat was flipped, reborn into a 3-unit mixed-use space with a daycare on the bottom floor and subsidized apartments above. He didn't stop there. 2 more buildings followed. By 28, Jamal had parlayed those into his first development partnership. He negotiated rent caps, built rooftop gardens, even hired local artists to paint the hallways. He wasn't just flipping buildings. He was rebuilding trust. He didn't tweet about it. Didn't post drone shots on Instagram. He just kept moving. But Sterling Tower, that was something else. That wasn't just another property deal. It was a message. A skyscraper in Midtown. Tenants with 7-figure bonuses. Lobby artwork valued higher than entire brownstones. The kinds of companies that sold themselves as diverse while their boardrooms were homogeneous as marble. The very first time he'd stepped into Sterling Tower, he'd been turned away, dismissed, labeled, profiled. But years later, while reading a dense legal brief late one night, a clause caught his eye. A private equity firm, overextended and eyeing liquidation, had begun selling off non-performing assets. One of them, Sterling Tower. Beneath the veneer of wealth, the building was bleeding. Outdated HVAC. Vacancy rates climbing. Tenants quietly leaving. The building was a symbol. But symbols are just structures. Jamal saw potential not just in the square footage but in the poetry of it. A place that once rejected him could become a beacon. Not just for his success but for others who needed to see the blueprint rewritten. Back in the present, Jamal stood in front of a mirror in his new office. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, letting in a wide wash of gray morning light. His reflection stared back, calm, composed, but carrying something heavier in his posture. He adjusted his collar slowly, brushing down the lapel of his jacket. His tie not too tight, his shirt still crisp after hours of preparation. His expression didn't change. He wasn't nervous. He was focused. A knock sounded at the door. His assistant, a tall woman with buzzed hair and designer glasses, stepped inside, tablet in one hand, her voice brisk but respectful. "They're ready for you in the boardroom," she said. "City Business Weekly just arrived. CNN's setting up." Jamal nodded, still staring at himself for a beat longer. Behind his calm, the weight of this moment pressed in. Not for vanity, For responsibility. On the sleek glass table beside him sat a folder, black leather, corner-clipped, thick with paper. Inside it, plans. Blueprints for more than renovations. These were designs for an incubator program that would target young developers from underrepresented backgrounds. A mentorship initiative pairing first-time architects with veteran urban planners. A floor of Sterling Tower repurposed into a co-working and startup space free of charge for minority-owned businesses. An entire architecture grant named after his mother. This wasn't just a win. It was an opening. He picked up the folder. His fingers curled tightly around the spine. It was time to flip the script. Not just for him, but for the next kid in the back of a bodega with a pencil in hand and a world in his head. The boardroom on floor 47 of Sterling Tower had the best view in the entire building. Its glass walls stretched from floor to ceiling, wrapping around two sides of the room like a transparent crown. Outside, the Manhattan skyline surged skyward, sleek spires of ambition, steel, and corporate dreams. In the distance, Central Park's green sliver broke the monotony, but otherwise, it was concrete and glass as far as the eye could see. This was a room designed to intimidate. The chairs were Italian leather. The table was dark walnut, monolithic, so polished you could see your reflection in it. The espresso machine in the corner was imported from Milan. The conference speaker in the center of the table probably cost more than Jamal's first car. It was a room where $100 million real estate deals were closed between polite smiles and quiet sips of espresso, where contracts were amended, alliances formed, and people who never set foot on the street decided the future of entire neighborhoods. Once upon a time, Jamal Carter had only seen rooms like this on TV, HBO dramas, corporate thrillers, reruns of Shark Tank. Other times, he'd caught glimpses of them while making deliveries, when a partner left the door open too long, or when a receptionist waved him through with just enough disdain to remind him that he didn't belong. Now he was at the head of the table. Same charcoal gray suit, same calm posture, still no tie. Only now there was no paper bag in his hand. No hoodie, no soaked sneakers. Just him. And the weight of the title, majority owner. On one side of the table sat three partners from Arkham Capital, a hedge fund leasing 2 full floors of the tower. They looked like they'd been minted from the same Manhattan mold. Sharp suits, summer tans that came from Martha's Vineyard, not construction sites. At the center was Bradley Kessler, salt and pepper hair immaculately combed, a navy tie with a gold tie clip, and cufflinks shaped like bull horns. He smiled often, but never with his eyes. Across from them sat Trevor Lang, the CEO of a venture-backed fintech startup that recently took over floor 33. Barely 35, skin smooth, hair styled by a stylist, not a barber. He hadn't made eye contact with Jamal since he walked in, too busy checking Slack on his phone and pretending not to be unsettled. Around the table were a scattering of others. Real estate attorneys with yellow legal pads, PR reps scrolling silently on tablets, a building manager who kept adjusting his tie nervously, and one diversity officer who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. And then, at the center of it all, Jamal. He placed a clean stack of papers on the table. Click. The room quieted. "Let's begin," he said, voice even. There was a pause. A beat where no one knew what to say. Power, real power, disrupts people's sense of rhythm. The silence stretched. Finally, Kessler leaned forward with a practiced smile. His voice was smooth, like someone used to charming investors over golf games. "Well, Mr. Carter," he began, "I think I speak for everyone when I say we were surprised to hear about the purchase." He let the word surprised hang like perfume, subtle, but pungent. Jamal didn't flinch. "You mean uncomfortable," he replied, folding his hands calmly on the table. The smile on Kessler's face faltered just slightly. "That's not exactly what I said." "It's what you meant," Jamal said, tone still cool, not confrontational, but undeniable. Another pause. "I think the question on everyone's mind," Kessler continued, regaining his footing, "is what exactly is your vision for Sterling Tower?" Jamal opened the folder. He didn't look around the room. He didn't soften his tone. He simply spoke with the weight of someone who'd earned every word. Stability, he said. Equity. Long-term value. And actual inclusion. Not just token hires and a Black History Month email blast once a year. Murmurs flickered around the table. Jamal began handing out color-coded proposal packets, each thick with spreadsheets, zoning analysis, renderings, and case studies. He narrated as they flipped through. Floor 6, he said, will be converted into subsidized co-working space, prioritizing minority and women-owned startups. Tenants will be vetted not by VC connections, but by community-based review panels. Floor 9, he continued, will host monthly workshops on equity in tech, accessible to public high school students, free of charge, sponsored in part by the tenants above them. The lobby, he added, gesturing toward a slide, will be redesigned. Less marble mausoleum, more open gallery. Inviting, transparent, art-forward. We've already commissioned a Harlem-based Black muralist for the centerpiece. One of the attorneys stopped flipping and looked up. A woman in PR squinted at the designs. The building manager cleared his throat, then stayed quiet. And then, finally, Trevor Lang spoke. He leaned back in his chair, one foot tapping quietly under the table. His voice was polite, rehearsed. With all due respect, Mr. Carter, this feels, what's the word, disruptive. We're a premium tenant. Our clients expect a certain image. Jamal's gaze snapped to him. Not fast, just direct. You mean whiteness, silence, and glass doors that only open one way? He said, his voice soft as velvet, but with steel beneath. The room froze. No one moved. Not a single page turned. I'm not removing anyone, Jamal said after a beat. But I am removing the illusion that this building only belongs to certain people. If your clients feel threatened by equity, then maybe you should reconsider who your clients are. Lang looked away. Jamal stood, slowly. No sudden gestures, just gravity. He looked around the room. I know this space, he said. I've walked these floors, delivered to these offices, been ignored in these elevators. I've seen what lives behind these doors. The same faces, the same meetings, over and over again. He stepped away from his chair and walked the length of the room, his steps measured against the skyline outside. I didn't come here to make you comfortable, he said. I came to redefine this space, physically, economically, culturally. This tower, my tower, is no longer just for the ones who inherited the penthouse. It's for the ones who built the scaffolding and were never invited up. He paused at the door. You can stay. You can leave. That's your call. He opened it without looking back. But from now on, you're visiting my house. Downstairs, the lobby had changed. It still gleamed, but it no longer felt cold. The lighting was warmer. A new mural was in progress. A vibrant, colorful abstract piece beginning to take shape across the western wall, with shapes that evoked community, movement, city life. The scent of coffee still lingered, but now it was from a new cafe, locally owned, with a chalkboard menu and jazz on the speakers. Behind the front desk stood a new face, a young Latina woman, early 20s, sharply dressed but approachable. She greeted people with a genuine smile, pointing out the new tenant map and directing foot traffic with warmth and efficiency. Her name tag read, Sophia. Jamal walked past the desk. Sophia nodded to him with respect. Not fear, not confusion, just acknowledgement. She knew who he was. Halvorsen was gone. No ceremony, no announcement. Just gone. The revolving doors, those same glass barriers that once seemed to reject him, parted with a soft whoosh as Jamal stepped outside. The city pulsed around him, alive and loud. Taxis honking, delivery bikes weaving through traffic, steam rising from manholes like ghosts of the old New York. People rushed past, heads down, chasing time. Jamal stood still for a moment, taking it in. He turned back and looked up. Sterling Tower stood above him, its windows catching the morning sun and throwing it back in gold streaks. But it didn't look untouchable anymore. It didn't look like it belonged only to the past. Now it looked like it belonged to the future. His future. And maybe, just maybe, someone else's too. The subway ride to Brownsville was long, slow, and as unremarkable as any weekday trip across Brooklyn could be. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a cold blue tint on the worn metal and plastic of the train car. The usual sensory cocktail filled the air. The distant screech of steel against steel, the rustling of newspapers, someone coughing near the door. A man nodded off 2 seats away. A mother soothed a crying toddler in Spanish. From someone's earbuds down the car came a steady stream of tinny reggaeton, the bass too low to feel but loud enough to register. No one said anything. This was just the soundtrack of the city's undercurrent, the unseen motion that kept everything else above ground moving. Jamal sat quietly, his tailored charcoal gray suit jacket folded carefully over his lap to avoid the grime of the seat. His shoes, once spotless, were now dulled by city dust and a misstep into a puddle back at 42nd Street. In his hands he held a black leather folder, gripped more tightly than he realized. Inside, blueprints, plans, the next chapter of something he hadn't yet found the words for. Outside the scratched and smudged train window, Brooklyn rolled by in streaks. Chain-link fences, rooftop water tanks, murals half-covered in graffiti, rows of brownstones with sagging gutters. The borough looked like it always had, fraying at the edges but still standing. And yet it felt different. He hadn't been back to this part of the borough in months, maybe longer. When the train groaned to a stop and the doors wheezed open, he stepped out and climbed the cracked stairs 2 at a time. The platform smelled faintly of old newspapers and damp iron. He crossed the street to the building on instinct, letting his feet remember the path even if his mind wandered. The building was still the same. Red brick, faded and chipped, with decades of graffiti sprayed over old tags. The corner apartment had a crooked air conditioner unit hanging out the window, humming with defiance. Rust stains curved down the side of the building like slow-moving tears. Paint peeled where it met the sidewalk. The buzzer had never worked. He entered the lobby, if you could call it that, a narrow corridor lined with yellow tile and a mail rack that was permanently half-broken. A single dim light bulb buzzed above his head. The stairwell smelled like it always had, a mix of old rice, pine sol and thyme, the kind of smell that etched itself into your clothes and memory, no matter how long you were away. 2 flights up, he moved quietly, the weight of memory on each step. Ms. Winfield's door was ajar. It had always been a warm brown, though now it was more chipped gray than anything else. The brass number above it hung at a crooked angle, 1 nail missing. She'd been his high school English teacher, the one who stayed later than anyone else, who refused to let any of her students drift too far into the shadows. She was 81 now, retired for several years, but her reputation in the neighborhood was immortal. She taught 3 generations of students, and to many of them, including Jamal, she had been more than a teacher. She was a lifeline. She was the first person to ask him why he was falling asleep in class, not scold him for it. The one who handed him his first Baldwin book and told him, with quiet certainty, "Don't just survive this place. Decode it." He knocked gently on the door, then pushed it open. Inside, the apartment was filled with light. The windows were bare, no curtains to filter the sunlight, and dust danced in the beams like suspended memories. There were books everywhere, stacked in uneven towers beside every piece of furniture. A radio played softly in the background, Miles Davis, Blue and Green. A plant stretched toward the window on a makeshift shelf, half alive, half stubborn. In a well-worn armchair by the window sat Miss Winfield, glasses low on her nose, a paperback open in her lap. She didn't look up, didn't need to. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Millionaire himself," she said dryly, still thumbing her page. "Took you long enough. You get too rich to answer your phone, Carter?" Jamal laughed under his breath. "Just been busy owning skyscrapers," she scoffed, closed the book with a sharp clap. "So they let you buy it, huh?" He stepped further into the room, grinning. "They didn't let me. I took it." That made her look up. Slowly, her eyes, still sharp, still searching, met his, and for a long moment they just looked at each other. She stood with some effort, moved to the small table by the window, and gestured for him to sit. "And what exactly are you doing with it, Jamal?" she asked, her tone shifting. It was the same voice she used when grading essays. Not harsh but surgical. He opened the folder and placed it on the table. Community floors, equity grants, a youth innovation lab, a floor for black and brown startups, a rooftop garden open to the public. "I'm changing the building's culture, starting from the inside out." She picked up the papers, eyes scanning them with startling speed. Her lips tightened as she read. One page in, she was already flipping ahead. "You made it out," she said after a long pause, her voice quieter now. Jamal looked at her. "I didn't," he said softly. "I just made it up." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was earned. Years lived between them. Years of struggle, of classroom lectures, of real-world learning and invisible work, settled quietly into the room. Outside, a dog barked twice. A child screamed in delight somewhere down the hall. Footsteps echoed above. "You know," she said finally, moving to her bookshelf, "when you were a junior, you told me you didn't want to own a business. You said you wanted to build something that lasted." He smiled. "I remember." She turned, holding an old, dog-eared copy of Invisible Man, its spine barely holding together. "And do you still?" Jamal nodded, slower this time. "But it's harder now. There's pressure to be the symbol. The one who made it. The exception." She walked back, pressed the book into his hands. Her fingers lingered there a second longer than necessary. "You're not the exception," she said firmly. "You're just visible now. And visibility comes with teeth." He looked down at the book. Familiar cover. Familiar weight. "You weren't just building towers, Jamal. You were building sight. Don't let them make you forget that." On the way out, the hallway was dim. A single bulb flickered near the stairwell. As he turned the corner, he nearly ran into a kid. Maybe 13, thin, hoodie pulled tight around his head. His sneakers were scuffed, the soles nearly coming apart. He clutched a sketchbook to his chest like armor. They both froze for a moment. "Nice suit," the kid said, eyes narrowing slightly, half skeptical, half impressed. Jamal smiled, glancing at the sketchbook. "Nice sketchbook." The kid smirked. "You an architect or something?" Jamal crouched down a little, his voice warm. "Not exactly, but I build things." He opened the folder again, careful, deliberate, and showed the kid the blueprint for the community floor. Wide open workspaces, an art studio, a youth tech lab. His finger traced the lines on the page. "This is going into a building downtown. Whole floor, just for kids like you." The boy leaned in, eyes widening. "That gonna be real?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Jamal met his gaze steady. "It already is." The headlines came fast, like summer rain on hot pavement. Loud, relentless, impossible to ignore. From delivery boy to developer. The man who bought Sterling Tower. Jamal Carter is redefining power. But who gets left behind? Gentrifier or game changer? They filled the morning news cycles, spilled across social feeds, crawled in ticker tape at the bottom of TV screens. Every outlet wanted a piece of the narrative. Some called him a genius. Some called him a fraud. All of them had something to sell. Visionary, sellout, disruptor, puppet. Every word more certain than the last. Every voice louder than his own. Jamal sat in the back seat of a sleek black car inching its way down Lexington Avenue. Traffic was a crawl, as always. The sounds of the city slipped in through the closed windows. Horns, sirens, a vendor yelling about hot dogs. Life in motion, indifferent and uninterrupted. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Mentions, tags, text messages. News outlets requesting statements. Podcast producers sliding into his DMs. A flood of Instagram reels set to orchestral music, overlaying his image in slow motion as though he were a Marvel character. Twitter threads unpacked his past, each line more confident than the truth. LinkedIn posts from people who'd once ignored his cold emails now sang his praises like they'd mentored him themselves. He didn't know whether to laugh or disappear. Across from him, Naomi Lynn, His longtime lawyer and one of the few people who didn't flinch in chaos, scrolled through a tablet with her usual surgical calm. "Your interview with Business Weekly drops tomorrow," she said, eyes still on the screen. "CNN wants you live with Anderson Cooper next week. They're flexible, but they want to do it from your office." "A view of power," the producer said. Jamal leaned his head back against the seat, rubbing at his eyes with thumb and forefinger. He hadn't slept much. Not really. "What's the blowback?" he asked, already knowing. Naomi finally looked up. "From the activist left? You're being called too soft. Not radical enough. That you're playing their game instead of flipping the table." He nodded slowly. "And the real estate guys?" Naomi raised an eyebrow. "They absolutely hate you." He let out a dry laugh, not out of amusement but exhaustion. Outside the window, the skyline climbed higher as they approached Midtown. The towering glass facades that once loomed over him now felt more like mirrors, reflecting versions of himself he didn't always recognize. He stared out at the city he loved, its chaos, its contradiction, and whispered aloud, more to himself than to her, "Isn't this what I wanted? A seat at the table?" Naomi turned to him, her voice even edged with something truer than reassurance. "They didn't give you a seat," she said. "You pulled up with your own chair. Now they're pissed it doesn't match the decor." That night, Jamal stood alone in his penthouse, high above the noise, and yet somehow right in the middle of it. The floor-to-ceiling windows gave him the exact view the old executives had demanded when the building first opened. Midtown shimmered like a circuit board, alive with motion and ambition. Traffic below moved in streaks of red and white. The skyline blinked with secrets. He sat on the couch, phone in hand. No music, no distractions. Just him and the relentless glow of the screen. He scrolled. A community organizer in Harlem calling him a corporate distraction. A blue-check Twitter thread comparing him to Booker T. Washington unfavorably. A long Medium post accusing him of polishing the master's house instead of burning it. And one DM, just one. No name, no punctuation, just, "Whose side are you really on?" The pressure wasn't just public. It was internal. It scratched at him like a splinter under the skin. Small, constant, never letting up. He tossed the phone face down on the coffee table and walked to his drafting table. Laid across it were plans. Not PR-friendly renderings or vanity towers for magazine spreads. These were different. Real things. Real impact. Affordable micro-housing units stacked above the co-working floor. A food incubator space on the mezzanine level for local culinary startups. Rent-subsidized artist studios lining the second floor, with access to materials and mentorship. No luxury branding. No glossy launches. Just a blueprint for a different kind of ownership. He ran his fingers over the paper, carefully, reverently. Quiet work. Invisible work. The kind that lasted. The next morning, in a sunlit cafe in Fort Greene, Jamal sat across from Maya Roberts, founder of one of the city's most vocal grassroots housing coalitions. Her group had once led a protest that shut down construction on a building not far from Sterling Tower. She wasn't afraid of headlines or of heat. She showed up in worn-out sneakers and a leather jacket that had seen more marches than most press secretaries. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, and her expression didn't soften, not even slightly. "Let me guess," she said, arms folded, staring him down. "Now that you've got the deed, you want to work together?" Jamal didn't flinch. He wore no suit today, just a black sweater, fitted jeans, and a plain notebook. His posture wasn't defensive, just open. "No," he said. "I wanted to work with you before. You just didn't see me." Maya raised an eyebrow. "That's funny, because for a long time, I didn't see myself in you either." Silence stretched between them like a test. Then Jamal reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the table. No big speech, just paper and proof. She opened it. 50 units of co-op housing in the building next to Sterling Tower. Bottom floor reserved for community services, legal aid, after-school tutoring, tenant advocacy. Community-owned, community-managed. funded by his firm, directed by hers. "This isn't atonement," he said, voice steady. "It's a beginning." Maya glanced at him, then back at the plans. She tapped the page once. "And who decides who gets in?" "You do," he said. "We help build it. You run it." She sat back, folding the folder shut. "All right then," she said after a moment. "Let's see if you're serious." They shook hands over a paper cup of burnt espresso and a growing line at the register. Outside, a news van slowed as it passed by, camera visible through the window. The world was still watching, always watching, but this time Jamal didn't flinch. He didn't perform. He didn't explain. He just nodded once and turned back to Maya. Because being visible was the easy part. Being accountable, that's where it got real. Not just everyone's gone home quiet, but that deeper, midnight kind of silence, when the city exhales and the walls feel like they're listening. It was well past 1 a.m., and most of the building had long gone dark. The polished hallways of Sterling Tower, usually buzzing with high heels, espresso machines, the soft tap of phone calls and private deals, were still. Still enough to hear the hum of the lights, the occasional creak of the steel bones of the building settling for the night. Only floor 9 remained lit, the floor Jamal had carved out. Co-working spaces, community design labs, late-night mentorship circles, offices that didn't care about your alma mater, only your idea, a tech repair nook run by teens, an art studio that still smelled faintly of acrylic and sweat and ambition. It was the floor that had no name in the elevator. You had to press a special key to get there. That was intentional. Let it be a secret for the ones who needed it most. Jamal sat alone in the corner of the co-working library. Hoodie up this time, sleeves rolled to his elbows. A half-drunk cup of chamomile tea sat beside him, cold. One desk lamp cast a soft circle of light, gold and warm against the deep blue hush of the night. No cameras, no interviews, no handshakes, no press releases. Just the city breathing softly beyond the floor-to-ceiling window, and a single piece of paper in front of him. Not company stationery, not a press memo, just plain white paper, blank. Jamal stared at it for a long time, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour. Time was soft at this hour, fluid. Then he picked up his pen and wrote, "Dear kid, they told no. They said I couldn't come in the front door. So I came in the next day owning the building. But this letter isn't about me. It's about you. You sitting in a classroom where they can't pronounce your name. You watching people in glass towers eat while your mom takes the night shift. You sketching dreams in the margins of your notebook because no one put your name on the roll call for possibility. They will underestimate you. They will confuse your quiet with weakness, your hustle with desperation. They will call you exceptional when you succeed, because it's easier than admitting the system tried to erase you. Don't internalize their surprise. You don't owe them your humility, but you do owe yourself your truth. You're not lucky. You're not the anomaly. You are the blueprint. So build, even when it's slow, even when you're broke, even when the rooms get quieter when you walk in. And when they ask how you made it, tell them, I stopped waiting for a key and built my own damn door. JC. Sterling Tower, floor 9. He read it twice, then once more. He didn't edit it, didn't second-guess the voice or the tone, because he knew exactly who it was for. Not for donors, not for press kits, not even for legacy boards or the next round of applications. It was for the kid with the scuffed backpack and a dream no one bothered to ask about. He folded the letter neatly and slipped it into a drawer labeled Legacy. Inside that drawer, a stack of grant applications from kids in Flatbush and East Harlem, portfolios from high school seniors applying to architecture programs, photos from the art studio 2 floors down, drawings from the third graders who'd visited on field trip day and left behind thank you notes with stick figure skyscrapers. And now this letter, a blueprint of sorts. Behind him, mounted above the bookshelves, hung the building's new mission statement. Not printed, but etched into reclaimed wood, burned letter by a local craftsman. Ownership is not just about property. It's about power shared. He looked up at it, took a breath, felt the weight of it settle across his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a commitment. The kind of promise you don't make loud, just the kind you make true. He stood up, stretched his arms until his shoulders popped, turned off the desk lamp and moved quietly into the hallway. Even the hallway on this floor looked different. Exposed brick, gallery walls showcasing youth artists, hanging ferns in steel planters. A mural halfway finished snaked along the south corridor. Two brown hands holding a compass made of broken blueprints. And down near the elevator, a young black janitor wiped down the glass office doors with a squeegee and a slow rhythm, humming something soft and wordless. He looked up as Jamal approached. Their eyes met. "You're the guy who owns this place, right?" The janitor asked, straightening a little. Jamal smiled, not out of ego but recognition. "That's what they say." The young man chuckled, eyes bright. "My nephew just got accepted into the design program up here. First one in our family even thinking about architecture. He can't stop talking about it. Says this place feels like the future." Jamal paused. That feeling, gratitude stitched with hope, landed deep in his chest. "Tell him to stop by tomorrow," Jamal said, eyes warm. "I want to see his sketches." The janitor's face lit up. "Yeah? He'd lose his mind." Jamal nodded. "That's the idea." He took the elevator down alone. The lights in the cab reflected his face back at him. Older now than when he started, a little more tired around the eyes, but steadier too, anchored. He stepped out into the lobby, past the receptionist desk, where a young woman was finishing up inventory. She nodded. He nodded back. No one needed to say anything. Outside, the city hadn't changed. Still loud. Still flawed. Still full of invisible lines between who belonged and who didn't. But somewhere tonight, a kid in a Harlem apartment was unfolding a letter addressed to them. A real letter, written with intention, from someone who had walked the unlit path and lit it on the way out. And somewhere inside this building, in the floor they forgot to name, a system was bending. Slowly, steadily, irrevocably, toward justice, toward ownership, toward legacy. 3 years later, the morning sun slipped through the tall glass atrium of Sterling Tower, brushing golden light across the floor like a quiet blessing. It moved slowly, as if taking its time, finally landing on the small bronze plaque mounted just beside the main entrance. There was no fanfare, no velvet rope or security guard. Just clean, brushed bronze set into matte concrete. It read, "The Carter Initiative, for Builders of Tomorrow. Founded 2025. Most people walked past it without a second glance. There were no suits in tailored rush, no valet lines of town cars, at least not anymore. Now the building opened its doors each morning to a different rhythm. Students lugging oversized backpacks with frayed straps. Entrepreneurs in worn-out sneakers holding their prototypes in tote bags. Grandmothers pushing strollers. Parents walking toddlers hand in hand. Freelancers with noise-canceling headphones. Activists grabbing free coffee from the community kiosk in the lobby. It was a building finally doing what it was meant to do, serve. Inside, Floor 6 pulsed with energy. It had been completely gutted and rebuilt with communal purpose. On one side, a pop-up design studio, run entirely by teens from Crown Heights. Inside, the hum of 3D printers competed with the sound of drill bits and the occasional burst of laughter when a prototype wobbled sideways. Across the floor, a food tech lab was in session. Today, they were testing packaging for a Dominican empanada brand launched by two sisters who'd immigrated from Santiago. Their logo was taped to the wall above the mini freezer, Abuela's Heat, near the far windowed corner, where overpriced hedge fund briefings had once dictated city zoning battles. A group of young students, black and brown and brilliant, huddled around table-sized 3D models of sustainable housing units. Their instructor, a former architect turned community planner, circled the room barefoot, sipping tea and challenging the kids to think not just about design, but ethics. The walls were covered in blueprints, pencil sketches, tape, scans, corrections, doodles, pages with notes scribbled in English, Spanish, Creole. Dreams in graphite, In the back of the room, nestled between a bookcase of donated design books and a printer humming its mechanical lullaby, sat a small photo frame on a shelf. Inside it, Jamal Carter, smiling wide, shoulder to shoulder with Ms. Winfield. Her hair had been pulled back in her signature scarf. His suit had been wrinkled from a long day, but the grin between them was unmistakable. Shared pride. She had passed the year before, quietly, a small ceremony, no obituary in the Times, but her words lived on, etched into the bones of the building now, alive in every blueprint and every sketch, every whispered reminder from one student to another. Decode the system, then redesign it. Elsewhere in the building, 36 floors up, Jamal stood quietly at the edge of what used to be a private event space, now called the People's Deck. It had been redesigned the same year the initiative launched. Gone were the crystal bar carts and velvet armchairs. Now it was an open-air rooftop garden. Native wildflowers spilled out of long wooden planters. Solar panels soaked in light near the far edge. There were benches carved from reclaimed wood, their backs etched with quotes from artists, poets, and local activists. This high above the city, the wind was gentler. It made the plants sway slowly, like they were breathing. Jamal stood near the edge, hands in the pockets of a soft black peacoat. He looked older now, not aged, just seasoned. His beard had filled in with streaks of gray, and the hard lines of ambition on his face had softened into something wiser, reflective. He'd acquired more buildings since Sterling, complexes in the Bronx, a community market hub in Chicago, even a cooperative housing development in Atlanta. But Sterling Tower was still home base, still the root. His phone buzzed, a message from Naomi Lynn, now his COO and still the sharpest person in any room. Final offer just came in from that global investment group. $1 billion valuation. You want me to entertain it? He stared at the screen. He thought of the plaque downstairs, of the garden blooming behind him, of the folded letter still tucked inside the legacy drawer on floor 9. Then he typed back, "No, let it breathe. Some buildings aren't meant to be flipped. They're meant to be rooted." He slipped the phone back into his coat pocket. Below, the elevator dinged open, and he joined a small tour group already assembled. Students from his old high school in Brownsville. They were here on a new mentorship pipeline, one of 5 in the city that now funneled youth directly into real estate, urban planning, and design fellowships. He kept the tour quiet. No speech, just movement and space. He let the building tell its own story. They walked past the community floors, through the artist studios, the small batch printing press on floor 11, the multi-faith meditation room. They ended, as he liked to end it, in the old boardroom. Once a shrine to financial power, it had been stripped and refurnished. The glass table was now wood. The walls were painted with a mural in progress, a skyline made of clasped hands and upward-reaching roots. Near the back of the group, one boy hung behind. He had on a hoodie 2 sizes too big and a backpack slung low, dragging his shoulder a little. His eyes kept darting around the room like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to be there. Finally, he asked, "You really used to deliver food here?" Jamal turned, smiled. "Yup, Penang curry and Thai iced tea. Usually to floor 43. The boy's mouth tilted. "And now you own it?" Jamal looked around. The light from the west-facing windows was golden now, soaking everything in warmth. His answer came slower this time, quieter. "No," he said. "Now we do." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. It wasn't thick, just a few pieces of paper inside. An application form, a welcome packet, and a blank sheet of sketch paper, freshly torn from a pad. The boy took it with both hands, holding it like it might disappear. "You build stuff?" he asked. Jamal crouched slightly, coming to eye level. "Not just buildings," he said. "We build sight, belonging, access." The boy blinked, then nodded like he understood just enough to dream. Outside, the city kept humming. Indifferent, infinite, impatient, still flawed. But from this angle, this deck, this floor, this room, a new skyline was taking shape. Not just one of steel and glass, but of purpose, of equity, of visibility, of legacy, and at its heart, not a monument, a doorway, always open, always waiting. For the next kid they told no, and the one after that, and the one who builds the next tower not to keep others out, but to bring them all the way in. 6 months later, Sterling Tower, Floor 6. Builders in Residence Fellowship Orientation Day. The seminar room buzzed with nervous energy, like the hum of a city just before sunrise. Tense, electric, hopeful. Rows of folding chairs stretched out across the polished floor, arranged with care but not perfection. The smell of dry erase markers and fresh paint still lingered in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of catered coffee and the cinnamon bagel someone had brought in from a corner deli. On the front wall, handwritten in thick, bold marker across 3 white bars. What does ownership mean to you? Design for impact, not ego. Your story belongs in the skyline. A dozen students filtered in young, sharp-eyed, layered in ambition and uncertainty. Some wore pressed collared shirts and carried portfolios. Others rocked hoodies, graphic tees, or thrifted jackets, their sketchbooks bursting at the seams. Many had never set foot in a skyscraper before, let alone one built for them. At the front of the room stood Maya Roberts, now the Director of Community Equity Programs for the Carter Initiative. Her presence was commanding, not in a loud way, but with the kind of steady fire that didn't need to shout. She wore a charcoal blazer over a faded Tupac tee, box braids swept to one side, clipboard tucked under her arm like it had always belonged there. She cleared her throat and raised her voice, calm but firm. "All right, listen up." The room fell into silence. "Welcome," she said, "to the 3rd cohort of the Carter Initiative's Builders in Residence Fellowship." A ripple of claps broke the air. "You're here," she continued, "because someone once tried to tell you this city wasn't yours, that its glass towers didn't reflect you, that its blueprints were too expensive, too protected, too coded in languages meant to keep you out." She paused. Let it breathe. Well, surprised, they were wrong. A few students laughed. Others smiled quietly to themselves. One girl near the front teared up and quickly brushed it away before anyone could see. "In this room," Maya said, "you're not the exception. You're the beginning of something new." At the back of the room, slouched low in his chair, sat Malik. 17. Flatbush, faded hoodie, sturdy construction boots, calloused hands, sketchpad on his lap filled with angles and lines no one had ever taught him, but instinct had whispered to him in math class margins and late-night bus rides. He hadn't spoken yet. Not during the icebreakers. Not during the group walkthrough of Sterling Tower's transformation. But when Maya opened the floor and asked if anyone wanted to share why they were here, why they applied what they dreamed of, something in him moved. He stood up, slow and uncertain, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want to build transitional housing," he said, "for kids aging out of foster care." The room stilled. Every breath waited. He kept going. Like, a place that don't feel temporary. Place that says, you're still home, even if no one else says it. For a long second, there was silence. Then came a wave of applause, soft at first, then louder, real. A girl near the front whispered, "Damn," just loud enough for the row to hear. Across the room, near the doorway, Jamal Carter had just arrived. He hadn't planned to speak today. This was the fellow's moment, not his. But something in Malik's voice caught him, stopped him. He stepped forward slowly, every eye turning toward him now, the whispers quick and stunned. "That's him. That's Jamal Carter." Jamal didn't take the mic. He didn't need to. He walked up to Malik and placed a firm, grounding hand on his shoulder. "I aged out too," he said. "I know what it's like to be between places, carrying everything you own in a bag, not sure what's yours, not sure if you belong anywhere." He turned now to the rest of the room. "But here's the truth," he said, voice calm but rooted in something deeper. "What you build doesn't just reflect you, it becomes you. Every line, every floor, every corner you carve with care becomes part of your story. So design carefully, build boldly, and remember, Every time you raise a floor, you make space for someone else. There was a stillness after he finished. The kind that doesn't beg for applause, but holds space for transformation. Later that night, after the buzz of orientation faded, the lights dimmed floor by floor. Floor 6 was quiet now, except for the gentle hum of the city filtering through the windows. Malik stayed behind, still seated at the drafting table in the corner. The others had gone home or gathered in the stairwell, trading numbers and excited whispers about projects and ideas. But Malik had stayed, half because he didn't want to leave, and half because the silence felt honest. In front of him sat his sketchpad, open to a clean page. Next to it, a small envelope. Maya had slipped it into his hand on the way out, saying nothing more than, "For later." Now he opened it. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. Heavy stock, edges slightly worn. He unfolded it carefully. At the top, in smooth, inked handwriting, "Dear kid, they told no." Malik read it slowly, line by line, lips parting slightly. He didn't know Jamal had written it. Didn't know that the letter had lived in a drawer on floor 9 for years. That it had passed through a dozen hands. Mentors, fellows, janitors, youth counselors, always appearing in someone's life at the moment they needed it most. But by the time he reached the last line, "I stopped waiting for a key and built my own damn door." Something in him shifted. He didn't cry. Not exactly. But something inside softened. This wasn't about being exceptional. About proving the system wrong or climbing some impossible ladder. It was about being seen. And more than that, seeing himself. He flipped open his sketchpad. Took up his pencil. That night, Malik began designing the building that had lived inside his chest for years. He called it the Hold. A transitional housing unit, but unlike any other. A place shaped like a hug. Rounded walls that curved gently, like arms embracing. Skylights in every room. Wide hallways with soft lights and real art. Spaces that whispered welcome instead of shouting you don't belong. Every room would have a nameplate, a shelf, a space to keep something sacred. Every tenant would have not just a bed, but a corner of the world that said, "You matter." He sketched until his pencil dulled. Until the first soft light of dawn pressed its fingers against the windows of Sterling Tower. It wasn't just architecture. It was healing. It was defiance. It was legacy. And it started like all revolutions do on paper. 2 years later, Queens, New York, Jackson Heights. The lot was nothing special. Chain-linked, cracked pavement. A rusted for lease sign swaying in the breeze. The kind of forgotten pocket the city stopped looking at. But Malik saw something else. He stood in steel-toed boots and a windbreaker that still smelled faintly of subway sweat and sawdust. Next to him, a small team huddled around a set of easels displaying renderings, community feedback sketches, and financial spreadsheets. The project had a name now, Haven House, a residential and support complex for youth aging out of foster care, complete with therapy spaces, mentorship hubs, gardens, and private rooms with locks they controlled. And at the bottom of the sign, beneath all the architectural credits and funder logos, in bold black lettering, in partnership with the Carter Initiative. Inside a makeshift trailer office, Malik stood before a city zoning rep, a building inspector, and a few skeptical local residents. He was nervous but more practiced now. "This project's not just for headlines," he said. "It's for the kids who leave court with a trash bag full of clothes and nowhere to go. It's for the ones who need more than 4 walls. They need dignity, permanence, peace." The zoning rep raised an eyebrow. "You're what, 20? Malik nodded. "Yeah. And I'm not here alone." He gestured to the window, where a crowd had started gathering. Residents, former foster youth, volunteers, a grandmother with a baby in her arms. Maya. Even Ms. Lynn, the legal shark herself, had shown up in flats and a Carter Initiative hoodie. And standing near the back, in a black peacoat and knit cap, was Jamal. He didn't speak, didn't wave. He just watched, and smiled. Later that week, back at Sterling Tower, Jamal sat in the once intimidating boardroom, his name now etched subtly into the glass. A new team filled the seats. Mostly under 30, mostly black and brown, some queer, some immigrant, all mission-driven. They were arguing passionately about a new grant structure for community land trusts in Detroit. Jamal just listened. A quiet satisfaction settled into his chest. He wasn't the center anymore. He didn't need to be. In his office, the legacy drawer was full now. Sketches, letters, designs, dreams. He opened a fresh folder and wrote, "The next initiative, not to be led by me, to be led by them." Outside, the skyline glittered. But below it, in the spaces between the towers, something more powerful was rising. Communities shaping their own futures. Young visionaries holding blueprints with trembling but steady hands. And buildings built not just for profit but for people. This was no longer just Jamal Carter's story. It was the story of those who followed the path he cut through concrete and widened it into a road anyone could walk. Bronx, New York summer. The train screeched to a halt at 149th and Grand Concourse, and Sofia Delgado pushed her way through the doors, her sketchpad clutched under one arm and her backpack heavy with textbooks and samples of reclaimed brick. She moved fast, always had. Old reflex. Growing up in a two-bedroom with 6 people, you learn to move or get trampled. The world didn't wait. Sofia was 22, Dominican, queer, and unapologetically sharp. By day, she studied urban design at a city college no one outside of New York had heard of. By night, she worked a front desk at a gym she couldn't afford to train in. But on weekends, she built. Small things for now. Pocket parks in vacant lots. Bus stop shelters turned into community art installations. She believed in function with poetry. Design with resistance. Space that spoke back. And now, she was standing in front of a shuttered parking garage that had become her obsession. Inside the hollowed concrete shell, it smelled like oil and rain rot. But she saw possibility. This was where she wanted to build La Escalera, the staircase. A 3-level community center with a rooftop urban farm, immigrant-led childcare co-ops, and tech workshops for teens who didn't want to code in English. She just needed someone to take her seriously. The Carter Initiative hadn't responded to her email. Not yet. So she showed up. Sterling Tower looked like something from another planet. Clean, gleaming, impossible. Sofia walked in with paint on her jeans and scuff marks on her boots. Security paused. She raised an eyebrow. "Tell Jamal Carter that Sofia Delgado is here with a project that will change the South Bronx." The woman at the desk blinked, then picked up the phone. 30 minutes later, Jamal stood in the co-working space, watching Sofia lay out her blueprints across the table like a dealer in a high-stakes card game. "This is different," he said. "Exactly," she replied. "It's not about saving the neighborhood. It's about letting the neighborhood design itself." She leaned forward. "I'm not here to ask for permission. I'm asking for backing. And I don't need your name on the banner. I need your bricks." Jamal looked at her, then down at the sketches. Color, depth, fire. Something electric moved behind his eyes. "You remind me of someone I used to be," he said quietly. She didn't blink. "Then you know I'm not going away." 2 months later, ground broke at Grand Concourse. And above the noise of jackhammers and scaffolding, Sofia stood on a ladder, spray painting the first word of the mural across the front of the structure. "Para la gente," for the people. That night, Jamal sat in his office with Malik, watching the news scroll across the screen. South Bronx project led by Latina architect gets Carter Initiative backing. "She's something," Malik said. "She's the next." The blueprint wasn't just being passed down anymore. It was being rewritten, translated, graffitied, reclaimed. The movement had changed hands. And now it had accents, colors, and angles no one saw coming. 6 months later. Sterling Tower, private conference room. The room was clean, quiet, and full of money. Not cash capital. Suits. Power disguised in smiles and casual blazers. The Westbridge Group, a 4th-generation real estate dynasty with old-school investors and new-school branding. They wanted La Escalera. Badly. Not to tear it down, but to own it. To partner with Sofia Delgado and expand the model nationwide Miami, Oakland, Chicago. They used words like scale, impact, and urban uplift, offered a 7-figure seed investment, a sleek rollout, Sophia's face on billboards, her name in magazines. And we'll handle the logistics, said their VP of strategic expansion, a clean-cut man with kind eyes. Legal, compliance, property acquisition. You won't have to worry about the red tape anymore. Sophia sat back, eyes narrowed. Her hands were steady, but her stomach coiled. No more red tape, no more control. Across from her, Jamal watched silently. They'd asked him to be there, as a bridge between generations. But he knew what this was, a fork in the road. He wasn't going to speak unless she asked. So he waited. 3 hours later, Sophia stood alone at the top of La Escalera's half-built rooftop garden. The city sprawled beneath her, loud, messy, alive. The Westbridge offer was in her inbox. One click could change everything. Fame, funding, franchises. But she couldn't stop thinking about the kid who came to every Saturday workshop. Or the Dominican abuela who baked pastelitos for the volunteers. Or her mother, who walked past this site every week just to see it growing. This wasn't a concept. It was home, and no one sells home. She picked up her phone and typed, to Westbridge. Subject, offer. Thank you for your interest. Respectfully, this model wasn't built for replication. It was built for reflection. I won't scale something that was born from struggle by handing it to people who never had to fight for a thing. Sophia. She hit send. Exhaled. Then turned toward the construction crew below. Let's get back to work, she shouted. Later that night, she met Jamal at a Harlem coffee shop. No suits, no headlines. You're sure? He asked. She sipped her espresso. They wanted my story, not my structure. He smiled, nodded once. Good. She looked up at him. Is this what it was like for you? Saying no when it would have been easier to say yes. No, he said. It was harder. Because back then, I didn't know if anyone would come after me. He slid a small envelope across the table. She opened it. Inside, a handwritten note. Dear kid, they told no. You know the rest. Pass it on. JC. 10 years later, the Carter Center for Equitable Architecture opening day. The audience rose in a quiet standing ovation as Sofia Delgado took the stage in a black jumpsuit and silver hoop earrings. Her hair was streaked with gray now. Her fire? Still volcanic. Behind her, blueprints glowed on the screen, designed by students from neighborhoods the city forgot, now shaping skylines. This building isn't a monument, she said. It's a relay baton. You run with it, then pass it on. She paused. And to the next kid drawing cities on the backs of receipts, I say this. You don't need permission to be here. You just need the nerve to stay. And somewhere in the crowd, watching quietly, Jamal Carter smiled. Legacy, finally, was no longer a person. It was a movement. You've heard the story. You followed Jamal through the lobby, past the security guard's dismissive glare, up the elevator to a place no one thought he belonged. You saw him trade a paper bag of curry for ownership papers, watched him turn steel and concrete into sanctuary, and witnessed as his blueprint became a bridge for others. You met Malik sketching his way out of invisibility. You stood beside Sophia as she turned down millions to protect something sacred. You watched a new skyline rise, not of glass and ego, but of purpose and people. But this isn't fiction. This isn't a fable wrapped in sentiment. This is a mirror, and it's asking a question. Now that you've seen what's possible, what will you build?